So, this was a dumb idea. Sonic the Hedgehog, an iconic legend that rattled Nintendo's grip on the console market by spin-dashing his way into the hearts of millions back in 1991. But it wasn't exactly his glory days on the Genesis that consumed my little child brain. As evidenced by an old family videotape of a trip to Disney World, I thought the blue blur running through the beautiful shores of Emerald Coast in Sonic Adventure was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Sometimes I wonder how my life would be different without this fateful discovery of a certain
Sonic Hedgehog,
as my mom put it. While every reviewer and their mother began coining the phrase a rough transition to 3D, I was living it up in the 2000s era of Sonic.
They call me Sonic.
I had a Sonic-themed birthday party, got Sonic Pinball Party from Santa, and played Sonic Adventure 2 on my GameCube more times than I could count. Sonic getting announced for Brawl blew my adolescent mind. But enough of the rose-tinted goggles on my past. Flash forward to now, and as a jaded adult, I'm no stranger to dunking on modern Sonic at almost every opportunity. However, after some reflection, I realized that I'm not as much of a Sonic fan as I often claim to be, which is why I decided to self-impose this dumbass challenge, instead of just playing every game casually like a normal person. Well, I don't know if a normal person would want to play them given unlimited time. You see, I haven't actually beaten most of the 3D mainline titles, and there's a handful I haven't played at all. Sure, I can assume that Sonic 06 is one of the most broken video games ever made, and that Sonic Boom is also one of the most broken video games ever made, but I figured it's time to find a definitive answer to the question. Did Sonic have a rough transition from 2D to 3D? And do you not want to mess with Sonic fans since we don't even like the games? I'm also doing this for the future of Sonic games. Sonic Frontiers is slated to release soon, and I want to be the best damn reviewer there is. I will be the only valid source for the definitive review of a game that is shaping up to fall somewhere in between a redefinition of open world platforming and one of the worst Sonic games ever made. And with Sonic's legacy fresh in my mind, I will transcend the limits of subjectivity and truly determine the fate of my favorite little hedgehog. So here we go, my attempt to beat all 13 mainline home console 3D Sonic games in 7 days. No time for spin-offs and handheld ports though, and I'm also not going for 100% completion or anything. I don't hate myself. Well, my copy of Lost World hasn't shipped yet. Day 1 was off to an optimistic start, as I decided to waste a good hour or two setting up and recording what will likely be the nicest shot in this video, considering that my plan to document the entire process while also gaming for 14 hours a day would quickly come back to bite me. Despite Sonic's shaky reputation with 3D and the fact that I'm going to have to play for an average of 14 hours a day to finish all the games in a week, I'm actually kinda excited. Ooh, very optimistic. First up is Sonic 3D Blast. I don't have a Genesis, so I'm just gonna use my computer. Ah yes, the true first 3D Sonic game, if we're getting down to specifics. Released as a last hurrah for the Genesis in '96 and later as a port for the failing Sega Saturn, 3D Blast is an isometric platformer that, while somewhat enjoyable, doesn't exactly feel like a Sonic game, which is why many consider Adventure to be the real leap into 3D. Graphically speaking, the game is a visual treat in both versions. While the Saturn is obviously more detailed and realistic 3D, going from 2D side-scrollers to 3D Blast on the Genesis is pretty impressive, and the levels are lovely in both versions, save for Spring Stadium, which kinda looks like an AI-generated hot dog stand. I very vaguely remember playing the PC port of this game as a kid, but I only recognized the first level on my playthrough, which checks out considering my prior ineptitude at video games. The main objective of 3D Blast is to run around killing enemies in each area to collect little birds trapped inside, then lead them all to a big ring and turn them into progress. The game plays like a strange collectathon, with the caveat that all of the flickies start running away every time you get hit. Not my favorite start for Sonic in 3D, if I'm being honest. Most of the difficulty in 3D Blast doesn't feel intended, but is instead a result of its incredibly slippery movement that makes every level feel like Sonic's shoes are coated in WD-40. It's fun and intense sometimes, but other times, dropping your little guys whenever you get hit and having to fumble around to pick them back up is a nightmare. The level designers at Traveler's Tales must have taken some notes from the sick fucks that worked on Sonic 1, because half the stage hazards are things that make movement even harder, like spin-o mode and springs and fans and an actual ice floor that somehow makes things even more slippery. All of these obstacles lead to a slightly frustrating experience, especially when making jumps in isometric 3D is already difficult. Traditional speed segments are merely a transition between zones, which makes 3D Blast feel more like a game that got Sonic thrown in to sell copies rather than a game designed with the intent for speedy platforming. In true Sonic fashion, the game was also developed quickly in the span of just 8 months, with enough critiques popping up over the last 2 decades that the game's lead programmer developed a mod that improves movement along with adding a level select menu and new features, which is really cool. However, I didn't play that version. I played the original. I'm here to play Sonic games, not good games. I tend to avoid giving scores to games on my channel, so I'll instead be ranking each soundtrack. While 3D Blast isn't exactly a Crush 40 butt rock intro to the third dimension, it cheats its way into a strong A tier by pulling a Sonic CD and having 2 separate soundtracks. A traditional Sonic-style soundtrack for the Genesis composed by Jun Senoue and Tatsuyuki Maeda, and a beautiful, diverse soundtrack for the Saturn composed by Richard Jacques, who wrote the incredibly cheesy yet catchy tunes for Sonic R shortly after. Overall, 3D Blast was a decent little experience. It was the shortest game on the list at an hour and a half, so by 6:26 p.m. I was watching the credits roll.
I didn't get a single Chaos Emerald. I don't even... Where are they? I didn't even see one.
Alright, 1 down, 12 to go. I mean, I know it was only an hour and a half, kind of like a warm-up more than anything, but the night is young. Sonic Adventure. I haven't actually played this one. I kind of feel like a fake fan. I think if I mailed this in, they would honor it, start sending me email updates. Alright, I'm gonna say it. Sonic's transition into 3D wasn't that bad. Huge shocker, I know. Granted, I didn't play this on an original Dreamcast, but despite Adventure being rushed as a launch title and attempting to juggle a million gameplay ideas, this is easily one of my new favorite Sonic games. Sonic Adventure was the game to save the Dreamcast and give Sega one last chance in the console market, and I can totally see how it worked, re-solidifying Sonic as one of gaming's giants in the late 90s. Sure, it's a little clunky around the edges, but I just love seeing the endless ideas and innovation packed into the early 3D titles, and for being almost 25 years old, it's insanely impressive. Sonic Adventure contains 6 character episodes that overlap with each other in both levels and storytelling, although their gameplay styles differ greatly. Because I have 13 games to review and a story to tell, I'm not gonna get down into the nitty-gritty of design, but the Sonic levels are the absolute highlight. They're fun! This game nails speed, aesthetic, and presentation while still giving Sonic the mobility and exploration that feels absent in later games. Despite Adventure displaying a timer, I found that the lack of a ranking system encouraged me to explore corners for hidden items and really appreciate each level, taking full advantage of being able to turn around and go backwards. More on that later. Repeat missions, which I didn't have time to play, involve ring collecting and time trials, so there's some great replayability for all the levels, including a pinball level where Sonic can take a shower? Why did they give him a unique animation for this? Why are there public showers at the casino? I'm glad Sonic's story is the longest of the bunch because his levels are by far the best, but I was pleasantly surprised by the rest of the game's entries. Tails is able to fly through levels and take tons of new shortcuts, so his missions are time trials where you race Sonic to the goal. They're cute. The Knuckles Emerald hunts are short and sweet, and I actually prefer the radar in this game to Adventure 2, because this one lets you detect multiple emeralds at once. Other than a couple neat level gimmicks, Amy's story was my least favorite. Luckily, it was over in an hour, but I had run into a problem. It was 4 a.m., and I was tired. Since you essentially have to beat Sonic Adventure 7 times and sit through 7 sets of credits, it's much longer than 3D Blast, and revealed to me just how much time I was wasting with all those fancy camera setups. Following my initial estimates, I should have been done with Adventure and starting on Adventure 2 by the end of day 1, but with 2 stories and the finale to go, I decided to call it for the night.
I'm already behind.
As I awoke the next morning, I was remotivated. I was gonna get back on track, and everyone knows that the best way to start your day is with Crush 40. What, you thought I was gonna say coffee? I don't need that shit, I have... Big story, then Gamma's story, then the final story. I couldn't be stopped. I was starting to truly understand what it's like to go fast. For a quick gameplay review, Big is a stupid character with a decent fishing minigame because that's just Sega in 1998. Gamma is an enjoyable run and gun with better controls than the mech segments in Adventure 2, and getting to transform into Supersonic and fight a giant water god while Open Your Heart plays in the background just about makes playing Big's story feel worth it. I love fishing minigames, but Big is really something.
Yoo-hoo, Froggy! Come out wherever you are. Oh man, where could my Polywog pal be anyway?
Sonic Adventure is the start of Sonic's foray into complex storylines. Mario may have just been out to save the princess again in 64, but in Adventure, Eggman wants to feed the Chaos Emeralds to a puddle. Sure, the humans might look like Playmobil toys, and the mouth animations in both versions of the game are absolutely absurd, but I love the earnestly cheesy storylines of the Adventure titles. Tails and Amy learning to be independent and do things without Sonic, the struggle of Eggman's robot Gamma as he grapples with free will, the flashbacks to the ancient history of the Echidna tribe. These stories are genuinely enjoyable. Regrettably, the one feature I didn't have time to properly explore was the Chow Garden, so I kinda just busted an egg open, pet the little man a couple times, and left him to grow up without a father figure. But the fact that an entire pet raising simulator with stats and minigames and shops was put into a game already pulling out all the stops truly speaks to how Sonic Adventure was the Dreamcast's core title. I love how many ideas the developers were willing to experiment with. From snowboarding to pinball to kart racing to fishing, this game's got it all. We're making it to the S tier early for the soundtrack here. I mean, I think a good chunk of these games are gonna make it in, but there's so many iconic jams here that if I started naming my favorites, we'd be here all day. This soundtrack just screams Dreamcast. It is the Dreamcast. If you held one at gunpoint and told it to sing, the little disc drive would probably start going wow, 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 wow.
That's it, Sonic Adventure 1 done. It's 4:15 p.m. and now I gotta start on Adventure 2. Like right now.
Ah, Sonic Adventure 2, my beloved and beloathed. Is that a word? Sonic Adventure 2 is the game that defined my obsession with Sonic as a kid. A certain friend's little sister spilling Coke on my GameCube incident is where my true consciousness kicked in as a 5-year-old, and I still replay the game every few years and challenge my friends to a speed race from time to time. If you pick Amy, you're a sick fuck, and you know why.
Alright, looks like when I replayed this game for the 3rd time last month, I finished in under 6 hours, so we're gonna try to get an even better time than that today. I'm going for world record.
I've played this game so many times that my brain was on autopilot for a majority of the experience, so I don't have anything groundbreaking to say this time around. Turns out, the novelty of playing new games or revisiting things you haven't seen since you were a child is more exciting than playing a game you just replayed 2 months ago. While Adventure 2 isn't quite overflowing with ideas and mechanics like the previous game, and the racing and mech segments are somehow worse, it still maintains the ambitious spirit and flair that made the Adventure series so beloved. The game trades out the hub world and some character mechanics for a more streamlined experience, with levels themed around a cohesive world and story rather than beach, desert, lava, snow, Mayan temple. Wait, what was that last one? The Sonic and Shadow gameplay is fantastic, City Escape is still one of the best video game levels ever, and I'm honestly itching to go back to the additional missions in both of the adventure games. But I might like Sonic Adventure more? Some parts of it at least. In Adventure 2, the Tails and Eggman levels are just so meh, and the beeping sound is incredibly grating no matter how many times I hear it. Knuckles and Rouge start strong, but the clunky camera and awkward controls in levels like Mad Space and Cannon's Core just make me I'd say something clever, but I'm running out of jokes after talking about this game so many times. When it comes to the story, though, I don't care what anyone says. Between Eggman pissing on the moon as a threat to the president, Eggman's grandfather post-mortem broadcasting a video of himself in a straitjacket and chains to tell everyone that his giant lizard is gonna destroy the world because the military killed his granddaughter, or the absolutely ballin' picture of Shadow in front of the moon after he sacrifices himself to save the planet? Sonic Adventure 2 goes hard.
Do you really think that the professor created him, Shadow, to carry out the revenge on all those who live here on Earth?
He was what he was, a brave and heroic hedgehog who gave his life to save this planet. Sayonara, Shadow the Hedgehog.
So yeah, I love this game, and I hate it. And I love it. Sonic Adventure 2 was made in a time where Sega wasn't afraid to experiment with new ideas, drop Sonic and friends into strange new environments, or actually tell a story. Shadow the Hedgehog is just a great character, a tragic anti-hero who overcomes his hatred for humanity and desire for revenge through the wishes of the girl he swore to protect. This game represents everything I love about Sonic, and serves as a bittersweet reminder of just how much the series has changed over time. A speedy playthrough of this game is much shorter than Adventure 1, so I was done with Hero Story at 7:30 p.m., Dark Story at 9:36, and busting it down to Live and Learn at 10:41. Easy S-tier soundtrack again. This is my childhood self's favorite Sonic soundtrack.
Alright, last time was 5:53. This time was 4:49, under 5 hours. That's what I'm talking about, baby. Alright, that was an absolute blur of a 5 hours, but I finished Sonic Adventure 2. I was underestimate, probably because I've played that game so many times. It's creeping up on me that this may have been a bad idea. Time for Sonic Heroes.
I don't know if it's the nostalgia bias, the Sonic bias, or the 2 AM bias hitting, but there's just something special about this era of 3D Sonic. Sure, the games are janky and awkward and clunky and rushed, but there's so much life and energy spilling out of them, and Heroes is no exception. Sonic Team shoots for the moon, and they miss again. They definitely miss, but you know, something about landing among the stars. In Sonic Heroes, you play as teams, sets of 3 characters responsible for speed, flight, and power, a blend of 3 different abilities that actually makes for some cool mechanics. The aesthetics here are immaculate, as you gun it through electric loops at a power plant, explore a haunted mansion, dodge trains and lasers on high-speed rails, jump between giant airships, or bounce around in 2 separate pinball levels, because Sonic Team really has a soft spot for pinball. Gameplay-wise, it's a very smooth and enjoyable experience until the halfway point, where things start to get annoying. Very few of my deaths felt fair, because the stage designers thought making tons of instant death falls and tiny platforms would be super cool, and then thought it would be even cooler if Sonic was just too fast to be playable, and Knuckles' punch could send him flying off the edge if you somehow had the balls to try and attack an enemy. I died so many times to random ledges, or grinds not connecting, or pressing a light dash on a set of rings, but uh-oh, that button is tied to 2 other moves, so I guess we're doing the a funny tornado spin instead. There are other buttons on the GameCube controller. Maybe use them? It's frustrating deaths like these that give 3D Sonic games their shaky reputation. They're so close to getting it right, and the presentation, visuals, and music are always so top-notch that these games remain fun to revisit, but also come bundled with a unique ability to make my blood boil. Despite feeling pretty frustrated by the time I hit the final levels, I pushed through, and by 4:14 a.m., I was done with Team Sonic's storyline. I was still behind, but it was time for bed. I would also like to point out that my eyes were extremely bloodshot by this point and remained that way for the entire week. Best proof I have that I'm actually enough of a freak to do this. I started day 3 with a sense of relief before quickly getting hit by a nice job. Want to play the whole game again? So I begrudgingly played through an almost identical set of 14 levels as Team Dark, and Heroes responded, "All right, cool. Now, what if all that was easier?" And thus, I played the entire game again as Team Rose, which is just a shorter, easier version of all 14 levels with a forced tutorial, as if I hadn't played the rest of the game 2 times already. At this point, I was more than ready to be done, but Vector just had to kick down the door and say, "Yo, I'm a fucking alligator! Wouldn't it be fun if you had to kill every single enemy in the level? Or find a bunch of tiny hidden chow? How about extinguishing 60 torches?"
What do you think you're doing here?
Who's this broad?
Vector? While alternate objectives like Lost Chow and Time Trials were a staple of the Adventure series, the Team Chaotix objectives are miserably tedious, like when I ended up looping around a level for a good half hour because I missed the single enemy that only spawns by dropping from a specific spot, but not until my 3rd lap around because I kept running past said spot too fast. Very fun. Look how happy I was after finishing all the Chaotix levels in one sitting. By the time I rolled credits for the 4th time, I had already obtained all 7 Chaos Emeralds in a minigame so clunky that I may or may not have utilized a totally legitimate game feature to preserve my diminishing sanity. Anyway, all that was left was another flying supersonic showdown with a giant boss while a vocal theme blasted in the background. And even though this exact scenario had already happened in the last 2 games and was about to happen 4 more times, fighting God while playing as God with cool music is my video game weakness. That shit is cool every time.
It's no use. But why can't I defeat you?
Because we're Sonic Heroes.
Oh my god. Before I moved on to the dreaded game, though, I realized some people might be upset that I'm neglecting Shadow the Hedgehog, despite the fact that Shadow is listed as a 3D Sonic game on Wikipedia. Now, I definitely wasn't influenced by the fact that Shadow the Hedgehog is a very long game that you have to beat 10 times to get the true ending, but I figured I'd at least call my friend, who happens to be a big Shadow fan, to clear things up.
Hello?
Yo, okay, so Shadow the Hedgehog isn't like a mainline Sonic game, right? It's a spin-off. I don't have to...
How dare you say this to me?
You don't play as Sonic, so for like this video where I'm, beating the 3D Sonic games, I don't have time. I need you to like say that it's a
I am going to explode with rage if you don't admit that Shadow the Hedgehog is a main game.
As we come to a close on this chapter of Sonic's history, I think I feel the same way about Heroes as I do about Adventure 2. Like a disappointed parent that can't help but love their child who is failing every subject in school except art class. Maybe I didn't like playing each level 4 times, but I did like listening to the soundtrack 4 times. The music of Heroes gets a strong S tier from me, from the frustratingly cheesy yet catchy vocal themes to some absolute slappers like Rail Canyon and Egg Fleet. If you told me to turn off the music while playing, I don't think I'd have the willpower to go through with this challenge. I kept listening to Sonic songs in the shower for the whole week because I felt like it.
12:48 a.m. Sonic Heroes is done!
Next up was
Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. I've never actually played it, so time to find out if it's one of the worst games of all time. That was a video game.
I've been told that Sonic 06 was bad more times than I can count, but nothing could have prepared me for actually playing it. Or the fact that I would enjoy most of it? 06 lands squarely in the so stupid and cheesy and fundamentally broken that it's hilarious category. So I actually had a lot of fun. From countless stupid deaths to movement glitches, infinite jumps, physics bugs, horrible boss fights, hilarious cutscenes, and the worst loading screen system I've ever seen, it was a wild experience. Yes. It's incredible. Fighting back against a video game that is not built for you to succeed is a challenge in its own right, as this is one of the hardest Sonic games I've ever played. There are so many segments that require incredibly precise inputs, fast reaction times, or just dumb fucking luck to survive, and there are multiple puzzles and platforming segments so difficult that the only sensible way to clear them is by skipping them entirely or clipping through walls. The main reason 06 ended up being one of the longest games on the list is because the loading system is unbelievably slow, as I probably spent a collective 2 hours looking at this screen. Individual levels often have 4 to 6 loading triggers that interrupt gameplay, and even single-line cutscenes need their own loads. I simply cannot explain how excruciating it is, but to give you an example, there's a mission where you have to protect Anna. She knows the secret. If you fuck it up a couple times, like I did, the game loads when you die, the guard goes, "What the fuck, man, she knew the secret." The game loads again, you talk to the guard to start the quest, the game loads again, the guard goes, "Protect her, she knows the secret," and the game loads for a 4th time, for a total of 2 full minutes before you can try the mission again. I'm pretty sure there's just a tiny little man inside the disc digging for the right files. There's a million more features I could talk about, and maybe I'll make an independent video someday if I'm in need of some extra cash, but Sonic 06 has been torn apart so many times by so many critics and reviewers that it feels repetitive for me to continue bashing it. Although it is fun. But since we have 8 games left and a legacy to analyze, let's talk about how crunch culture and corporate greed turned bad video games into a core part of Sonic's identity. The short version of 06's development history goes like this. The game was originally planned for PS2 and Xbox, but with Sonic's 15th anniversary coming up, Sega wanted something big. So Sonic Team started production on next-gen consoles for a big celebration and revival. A game literally titled Sonic the Hedgehog. Development plans were lofty and spirits were high until Yuji Naka, the creator and heart of Sonic, left in the middle of production, which was followed by a crazy double whammy from Sega, splitting the team in half to work on Secret Rings, while also telling the 06 devs to finish the game for the holiday season. The fragmented team that remained, along with QA testers, warned Sega that the game was not ready, to which the corporate response was, "We don't give a fuck." But hey, at least it sold strongly. 06 wasn't the first time Sonic was crunched, nor would it be the last. Adventure was filled with glitches on launch and needed to be patched before the Dreamcast's US release. The producer of Heroes lost weight and suffered from insomnia due to deadlines and Sega management, and I'm sure that he wasn't the only employee under pressure. Even Origins, a re-release of the beloved classics, ended up messy after being produced under, quote, major time crunch. I know interview talk can be bullshit and anyone can spin a narrative, but from so much of what I've read, Sonic 06 was supposed to be something. It was the reboot, the rebrand, the big push. The game was about to be named Sonic the Hedgehog after all. Sonic Team was adamant in interviews about wanting to seriously fix camera issues, inspire exploration through branching paths, and tell a deeper story while returning to Sonic's roots. Everything about 06 ended up so hilarious and bizarre that I don't actually think it's the worst Sonic game. It feels like a faint glimmer of hope buried inside a scrapped tech demo. Now, I'm not saying that infinite time or less pressure from Sega would have delivered a faultless experience, as there is a scene where Sonic kisses a human woman.
She did it! It happened! She kissed him! Oh shit!
There are a lot of wacky decisions in both the writing and gameplay departments that I don't think would have worked even with time and polish, but the key phrase here is a lot. They left it all in. 3 stories, 9 playable characters, vehicles, hub worlds, side quests, cutscenes. Strangely enough, 06 feels like the last time Sonic truly tried to shoot for the stars. But the launch was so bad that Sega didn't pick themselves back up and build another rocket, they defunded the entire space program. At the very least, Sonic 06 is an interesting relic that I'm glad to have finally experienced. And the soundtrack was pretty good. I was gonna give it a C, but after listening to it some more while editing, I'll bump it up to a B, and then up to A for His World, which is arguably one of the best Sonic themes. Maybe a tier list wasn't the best choice for reviewing these soundtracks.
Kicking ass fast. Dude, they say ass in this song. I thought that was the coolest thing ever when I was a kid, dude. When he says kicking ass fast in this version of his, oh my god.
At the end of the day, 06's history is frustrating, and I don't think there's a better way to sum up the gap between expectation and reality than with this quote from Sonic Team during an E3 interview. The core concept that they've been talking about is a return to Sonic's roots, but another one of the things they're really working for at this point is, it's his 15th anniversary. There have been 15 years of Sonic games, and they really want to make this the definitive Sonic. It's basically something that they're trying to put together, the best moments from 15 years of Sonic gaming, and really try to give back to the people who've supported the series. Boy, I bet Sega never pressured their developers to release a game for the holiday season again. That would be crazy. But enough about game development. How was I doing by the time I was done with this thing?
It is currently 3:38 a.m. on day 5.
Technically, it was still day 4, but give me some slack. I spent the whole day playing Sonic 06.
Which means I have 3 days to finish 8 games. So you could say I'm a little behind. I'm gonna have to, start sleeping less.
At this point, stress was building as I contemplated why I even started this challenge in the first place, as I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to finish in time. It's not like I was trying to eat at every themed restaurant in the United States, I was just playing mediocre video games for a week. Why would anyone even care? But then I remembered that people will watch anything. But then I remembered that I'm a Sonic fan, goddammit. Nothing I do makes sense.
Here we go, baby. It's time for the Wii games with the tilt controls.
Maybe Sonic is bad, actually. Sonic and the Secret Rings is the first of 2 entries in the Wii-exclusive Storybook series, where Sonic gets transported to a fantasy world. In Secret Rings, Sonic gets sent to the Arabian Nights to help a genie named Shara defeat her evil genie ex-boyfriend before he erases all of the knights from the storybook because he feels like it. Okay. Aesthetically speaking, the game looks great. I really like the art style, and the setting makes for some cool world designs. Musically speaking, Secret Rings is a sleeper A tier for sure. I hadn't really heard most of this soundtrack before, but it jams. What it lacks in quantity, it makes up for with a lot of great vocal tracks, including the main theme, which honestly plays a little too often as the level complete and level select music. Unfortunately, I now have to talk about the gameplay, and Secret Rings is like being sold a joyride in a sports car, but getting locked in a 2010 Honda Civic with a brick tied to the gas pedal and the steering wheel replaced with a Wii remote. That's right, this game is an action platformer with tilt controls, everyone's favorite way to precisely control a speedy character. To make the game feasible with the sideways Wiimote's limited control scheme, Sonic runs forward automatically, making Secret Rings a very on-rails experience. Automatic movement works in simple arcade games like Endless Runners, or as an alternative to regular platforming stages like the minecart levels in Donkey Kong, but when that much control is taken away from the player for an entire game, it kinda sucks. There are plenty of times where you'll get hit by some bullshit, but you're not allowed to pick your rings back up since you can't turn around. Other times, missions will force you to kill entire sets of enemies, despite the auto-targeting homing attack being a piece of shit, forcing you to constantly do this dumb little back shuffle to get them all. It's not a great time. Secret Rings also contains a brand new RPG leveling system, so you can waste your time equipping skills to improve the controls, like making Sonic jump better, brake better, turn better, accelerate faster. I guess they made him control like a dead fish on purpose. If you only remember one thing about Secret Rings though, I want it to be this: the best Sonic cutscene ever written.
Shara, will you grant me one more wish? I wish for a mountain of handkerchiefs. Now, just let yourself cry, as much as you need to. You'll have plenty of handkerchiefs to help you through it.
That is literally how the game ends. I don't really have much else to say about this game. There's a few fun ideas and tougher challenges scattered about, and the storybook theming is a fresh idea for Sonic to explore, but the game is way too clunky and frustrating overall, so I was very glad it was over in 6 hours. They cut the 06 team in half for that? The game where I fucking for 6 hours? Fortunately, I was offered a break from the Wii in the form of Sonic Unleashed, the first Boost-era game. Unleashed didn't receive amazing reviews upon release, but opinions on it seem to have shifted positively over time. Plus, Endless Possibility is my favorite Sonic theme, so spirits were high as I prepared to dive into this globe-trotting adventure. Here we go! Since I was saved from the horrors of 06 by not owning a next-gen console at the time, Unleashed was the true next-gen Sonic game in my eyes. When I saw that first trailer drop on the official website in 360p, I thought I was looking at an animated movie. But no, that was gameplay. In reality, it ended up looking like this because I got it on the Wii, but I remember it looking like this. Except that's also not how it looks. That's being emulated on a computer worth more than all my internal organs combined. This is how it actually looks running on an Xbox 360. Chunky. While the game's graphics are fantastic, Unleashed doesn't run well on its original hardware, especially in the night stages, with slowdown and frame rate drops rivaled only by its older brother 06. Presentation-wise though, this game is one of the best in the entire franchise. The lively international theming, the strong voice acting, the immaculate opening cutscene, the culturally diverse orchestral score, like, my god, I could talk about this game's music alone until the end of time, but I'm just gonna put it at the very top of S tier where it belongs. As far as I'm concerned, nothing tops Unleashed's soundtrack. With its stunning cities and levels alongside a rich mix of instrumentation and musical genres, Sonic Unleashed is an incredible art piece. But as an actual video game?
I've been playing Sonic Unleashed for the last 7 hours straight, and I don't think I like this game.
Sonic Unleashed might be the most disappointed I've ever felt revisiting a game from my childhood. I know the level design is completely different in the Wii version, but there isn't a general consensus on which version is better. I figured the next-gen version would be the way to go, but it still ended up feeling much rougher around the edges than I expected. Sonic Unleashed introduces the boost formula, where you can hold down a button to run extremely fast and plow through any enemies in front of you. Problem is, the boost formula feels too fast in this first iteration, with one wrong turn or button press being enough to send Sonic flying to his death. On the opposite end, the Werehog levels are way too lengthy. They're clunky puzzles desperately carried by a combat system that can barely function on the system it's running on.
I know little girls who are better with a hammer than you. Well, one anyway.
Didn't know Sonic turning into a werehog also makes him sexist. The daytime levels aren't bad, per se. They're carried by the non-zero amount of fun in going stupid fucking fast while listening to cool music, but most of the real platforming is found when the game transitions to 2D, which controls awkwardly because of how quickly Sonic accelerates. The nighttime levels consist of slow, methodical platforming. A lot of ledges, climbing, swinging, and bullshit tightrope balancing with scattered checkpoints that force you to replay half the level if you miss a single input. Yeah, me too, man. While the amount of combos available is impressive, fighting big groups of the same enemies over and over again makes combat feel very monotonous. It doesn't help that the incredible nighttime music gets interrupted by the same battle theme every 10 seconds. Also, why did the Sonic developers suddenly become obsessed with QuickTime events starting in Unleashed? There are so many of them in this game. Why is almost every boss fight filled with them? Why does the climactic final boss literally end by pressing X 60 times? My biggest issue with Unleashed is the medal collection system. To beat the game, you have to gather around 200 hidden medals, which seriously slows down pacing without adding much real value. While the red rings in later games like Colors and Generations add some decent replayability with smarter placement, a forced collectathon doesn't work with Unleashed's daytime formula, as attempting to spot tiny coins while flying through blurry levels at high speeds, or trying to actually grab them, is super difficult, especially when turning around isn't an option. Therefore, the easiest way to earn enough medals is to spend an extra 10 minutes in every werehog level scouring corners, or fumble around the hub world to find the ones hidden behind pots and buildings. I probably played the daytime levels for less than 20% of the time it took me to beat the game, so very little Sonic gameplay in this Sonic game. I also realized that my vague childhood recollection of Unleashed was actually the repressed trauma of never being able to beat the game because Eggman Land was too hard. Sure, I get that this level represents Eggman finally building the nightmare world of his dreams, but come on, 10-year-old me didn't deserve that. Fuck, 24-year-old me didn't deserve it either. In playing all these Sonic games back to back, I was really able to notice a steady loss of control as each entry takes away movement options and player expression. In the Adventure series, Sonic has tight controls and can freely move around in each level, but instead of expanding on this fluidity and exploration over time, Sonic Team spent 20 years going in the opposite fucking direction. Heroes gets a bit more linear, 06 introduces the restrictive super speed segments, which then evolve into the Secret Rings auto run before finally settling into the boost formula in Unleashed, where you spend half your time holding down one button to blast through everything. Instead of creating an experience built upon quick, engaging decisions, Sonic Team kept adding literal speed until Forces became a game that barely needs to be touched to be completed. In my eyes, the boost formula has never truly worked, and now exists as a wedge that split the Sonic fandom in half, creating divisive opinions on the best type of gameplay and countless discussions on whether or not Sonic could ever truly work in 3D. I was super pumped to enjoy Unleashed, but in the end, I wasn't able to see why everyone holds its gameplay in such high regard. Sonic Unleashed was also one of the only games I went several hours overestimate on due to medal collecting, so after around 15 hours of disappointment, I was ready for a change of pace, and back to the Wii it was. The two longest games are out of the way, but I still have 6 games to finish in a day and a half. I think I can do it. Sonic and the Black Knight was a video game where Sonic gets transported to the world of King Arthur, like being locked in the Honda Civic again, but now it can shift into reverse and there's a sword taped to the passenger door. I've noticed that quite a few Sonic fans, both on the internet and friends of mine, have a certain fondness for Black Knight, and I get it. If I had played this game as a kid, it probably would have been sick as hell. Like, Sonic with a sword? Come on. But alas, I am a soulless adult, so the magic wore off pretty quick. I don't even know how confident I am in saying this, but I think Black Knight might actually be worse than Secret Rings. It feels like a mindless gimmick extended into an entire game. Just shake the Wii remote like crazy and run straight forward. Very few levels in the main story offer much in terms of platforming, and I'm still not a fan of the on-rails gameplay found in these Wii storybook entries. Like many Sonic games, there's a sprinkle of interesting ideas that aren't developed enough to be engaging. There's a foundation of blocking simple attack strings and parrying boss attacks, and you can even switch characters and forge new weapons, but like a dull blade against an overcooked steak, Black Knight just ain't cutting it. One thing I will give props to is the writing. At the end of the day, it's nothing groundbreaking, but Sonic's deep determination to follow his heart while maintaining his carefree attitude in the face of danger is one of the reasons he's my favorite video game character, and the writers nail it here. Using the game's title to hide a major plot twist about the main villain is rad as hell, and the final sequence is absolutely nuts when it goes from Sonic magical girl transforming into a golden knight and beating the shit out of an eldritch goddess to a very casual,
Every world has its end. I know that's kind of sad, but that's why we gotta live life to the fullest in the time we have.
you know shit's bad when Sonic the Hedgehog has you contemplating your life choices at 11 p.m. on a Saturday. I have the same closing thoughts for Black Knight as I did for Secret Rings. I think the music, visuals, and overall aesthetics of the storybook games are neat, but the gameplay just sucks. Soundtrack's gonna be a C. Not bad by any means, but other than the jam and vocal themes, there wasn't anything that really stood out to me. Fight the Night is definitely one of my new favorite Crush 40 songs though. And I miss Jason Griffith's Sonic voice.
I'm Sonic! Sonic the Hedgehog!
I just kind of zoned out and held forward and went like this for 3 hours and I was done. I thought this was gonna drive me insane or something, but I feel nothing.
Alright, crazy story. When Sonic Colors was released back on the Wii, it was, get this, actually well received, and remains a pretty popular 3D Sonic title to this day, even getting a remaster on modern consoles in 2021. Now, I'm not going to be talking about Colors Ultimate specifically. I don't love how it looks, and really wanted to get an alternate setup working, but after quickly encountering some problems, I decided to swap to my safest bet since I was running out of time. Maybe this is the sleep deprivation talking, but Colors was just fun? A moment of respite at the very least. Even with its heavy use of 2D gameplay and the boost formula, this game felt way better than Unleashed. Sure, the levels aren't perfect, but the boost feature is manageable, Sonic can actually turn a little bit, the 2D segments have fun puzzles, the Wisp mechanics add some nice variety, and the red star rings are actually fun to collect. The game is also a treat for the eyes as you explore Eggman's interstellar neon amusement park and speed through tropical resorts, aquarium parks, and starlight carnivals, ignoring the insane amount of bloom on the remaster. My speedy playthrough may have been less than half the runtime of Unleashed, but I got to just play as Sonic in the Sonic game. There were a few times where I wished Colors didn't constantly push me forward or stop me from backtracking so I could turn around and grab a red star ring I missed, but overall, I enjoyed the experience well enough. However, I did feel a constant sense of disappointment in the department where Sonic games used to try and stand out, storytelling. Almost every 3D Sonic game prior attempts to introduce new characters and build a world more complex than you'd expect from a 3D platformer. In Colors though, Sonic's character is wiped clean with his cockiness turned up to 11, shifting him into a one-note wisecracking jackass who only exists to be mean to everyone he comes into contact with. I've come to hate this era of Sonic. I don't think it's Roger Craig Smith specifically, he does a fine job. It's mostly the script that feels like a crudely written kids show.
It seems an evil man, and you might know him, who they call Baldy Nosehair.
Baldy Nosehair! That's the best thing I've heard all day!
There is also very little to be found in the overarching storyline. Cutscenes in between finishing each area are just Sonic making fun of Eggman's mustache or Eggman's robots being stupid, with no real build-up to any final sequence. Maybe Sonic Team thought it was finally time to ditch the cliche Super Sonic fights a big scary demon, but the final boss of Colors being a giant Eggman robot after already fighting 6 other Eggman robots is fucking lame. And Super Sonic fighting a big scary demon is cool, and I like it. Might as well wrap things up with the music. Sonic Colors gets a strong A tier from me. I've been using songs like Sweet Mountain and Planet Wisp in my videos since the early days of my channel, and the entire soundtrack just emits a lovely nostalgic feeling. As I rolled credits on the game though, I was starting to feel pretty exhausted. It was early in the afternoon on day 7. Oh right, I forgot to mention, it's the final day. And I was not looking forward to the fact that I still had 4 games left, especially since I'd been running on less than 5 hours of sleep for several days to make up for lost time. There's just something so menial about being stuck with boost-era gameplay all day, and the lack of innovation in writing or character development left me little to hang on to outside of the music. If I wanted to beat Sonic, I needed to be Sonic.
My copy of Sonic Generations is all beat up from that video where I was crying in the shower with it.
While Sonic Generations is one of my favorite Sonic games, calling it a 3D Sonic game is like calling someone who plays all 13 3D Sonic games in a week mentally stable. Sure, you might be partially correct, but things get a little messy when you look under the surface. The gameplay of Generations consists of revisiting 9 stages from previous Sonic games while switching between classic 2D and modern 3D. There's 2 levels in each stage, one for each Sonic, but the 3D levels also constantly switch to 2D segments to allow for more engaging platforming. Thus, the game ends up being a solid entry in the franchise because it's mostly 2D. Do you see the problem here? Generations awkwardly demonstrates that there just isn't enough to work with when it comes to the boost formula, and that the simplicity of its 3D platforming can get old pretty fast. As an anniversary experience, I still think Generations is great, and I gotta give props to Sega for having the balls to include a level and boss fight for Sonic 06, but I definitely didn't enjoy the 3D segments as much as I used to. Maybe these levels would have been more enjoyable if I hadn't just cleared most of the games they're originally from, but I was also just yearning for the days where I was able to fully move around in a Sonic game. Continuing from Colors, there's also no real story of note here, but I'll give this one a pass for being more of a celebration. At least they brought back Super Sonic for the final boss fight. Despite classic Sonic now being milked for all he's worth by Sega, Generations is the final place in which recalling Sonic's history feels appropriate. Green Hill Zone has been regurgitated enough times to induce a groan and an eye roll every time I see it nowadays, but I'm okay with it here. I tolerate it. Overall, this game is still very solid, looks great, and is another one of the few Sonic games I might recommend to a sane human being. The soundtrack gets a solid B tier, not for lack of jams, but because it consists almost entirely of remixes. There isn't really anything new to talk about.
Hey Sonic! Enjoy your future! It's gonna be great!
And don't be in the game they want to make in 2006!
After comfortably speeding through Generations in 3.5 hours though, it was time to steel myself for the final stretch.
Just rolled credits and I realized that Colors and Generations were the calm before the storm. The final 3 games are all some of the worst in the franchise. Lost World, Boom, and Forces. I don't want to play any of those, and yet... You just had to try and copy Mario Galaxy 6 years after it came out, didn't you? You just couldn't resist. Sega, did you think the hexagons would cover it up? I know, calling Lost World a Mario Galaxy ripoff is a pretty serious claim. Just about every video game gets endlessly compared to its competitors nowadays, and that kind of pressure can set unrealistic expectations when trying to innovate in a popular genre. But that shit doesn't apply to Lost World. Before I get to complaining, I do want to say that I respect ditching the boost formula to slow down Sonic's gameplay. I actually think it's what the little guy needed. And with 2 Mario Galaxy games to pull from, Sonic Team had so much great stuff to work with. They got the rolling ball level, the launchers, the small circular planet puzzles, the small circular planet bosses. They were so close to imitation, but they forgot the part about Mario Galaxy where it's actually fun to play. Sonic Lost World is by far the most upset I felt all week.
11 games in and I was getting close to rage quitting. I'd tried and failed several times to play Lost World over the past few years, but every attempt was so unremarkable that I could never bring myself to get very far. Sonic has been given a brand new set of moves this time around, like wall climbing, a kick, a double jump, and a multi-target homing attack, which all sounded cool every time I booted up the game until I inevitably shut it down a few minutes later. This time though, I wasn't allowed to back out. It's hard for me to explain why everything in Lost World makes me so angry, but Sonic just doesn't feel right. He turns weird, he locks on weird, he climbs weird, he jumps and accelerates weird. Nothing about his movement feels fluid at all. So I figured I'll make things even more obscure by phrasing my complaints in the form of questions, much like I did while yelling at my monitor for the 4 hours it took me to beat the damn thing. Why do you have to constantly hold a button to run? Why does your speed and momentum change randomly throughout the level? Why is the first level identical to Green Hill Zone again? Oh, Windy Hill, my bad. Why are a bunch of the springs invisible? Why do the 2D segments control even worse than the 3D ones? Why are the wisps back? Seriously, they left at the end of Colors. Why are they here? And why do you have to dismiss a text prompt every single time you use one? I'm glad they completely interrupted the flow of gameplay to let me know the laser power has depleted. I didn't notice that Sonic wasn't a fucking laser anymore. What the fuck happened to the Sonic story writers? Where did they go? Are they okay? Why are the Deadly Six the worst characters in the history of the franchise? You got the sad emo guy, the fat guy who loves food because he's fat and stupid. Ha! Get it? It's so funny because he's fat.
Who are you calling fat?
Oh, and don't forget the girl who's so sassy and only cares about shopping and makeup and hot girl things.
The last time we met, you ruined my nail art. Now I have to reapply a whole new coat.
Oh my gosh, are you serious? I am so sorry.
Oh, well, in that case...
Oh no, what I meant to say is, I'm so sorry that you have nothing more important to do in life.
Holy shit, Sonic. Why is every boss fight so easy and boring? Why is the final boss a near carbon copy of the Nega Wisp armor from Sonic Colors if the game is supposed to be centered around slower parkour movement? Why is music the only thing that Sonic can get right? Can you motherfuckers please make a good video game again? Lost World sucks, it looks nice, and the music is nice. B tier. That's it. For most of the week, I had only been experiencing 1 or 2 games per day, which gave me ample time to process each one. However, the final 5 all packed into day 7 were starting to give me whiplash from just how quickly they were declining in scope and quality, like a broken aircraft plummeting with no hope of pulling back up. And I was strapped in the cockpit until the very end.
So it's 10 o'clock, I just finished Sonic Lost World. Unfortunately, the next 2 games are also bad, and if I played both of them all the way through, it would take me about 9 hours, which would take me to 7 a.m. And that sounds like a fucking nightmare. But I never said how I have to beat Sonic Boom.
You know what? I should have played Shadow the Hedgehog. While it was a bit too late for me to regret my past decisions, I had a trick up my sleeve. Removing the Wi-Fi connection from my Wii U meant my copy of Sonic Boom wouldn't be able to update itself from version 1.0, and that version just so happens to have a few problems. Now, just because Knuckles can do a silly little infinite jump by repeatedly pausing the game doesn't mean this was gonna be a walk in the park. Sure, I've done a few Sphinx clips and moon jumps in my day, but I wouldn't exactly call myself a speedrunner. Beating this game the silly way was a backup strategy I'd prepared in the event I was behind schedule, which I very much was. I hadn't seen the route, I didn't even know how hard it was, but as the night settled in, all I knew was that I had to do it. If I couldn't pull it off, it would take approximately 7 hours to reach the credits, and there was no way in hell I was about to play Sonic Boom, Rise of Lyric until the sun came up. So I pulled open an any% speedrun from 2014 and got to jumping. While Past Me learns how to unlock the power of flight, let's talk a little bit about what kind of game I'm actually speeding through. Sonic Boom is a spin-off franchise complete with Wii U and 3DS games, a TV show, a comic series, and a toy line. They certainly had something planned. The main game, Rise of Lyric, was outsourced to new developers at Big Red Button to specifically appeal to Western audiences. Couple this with a patented Sega holiday release deadline and voila! One of the most generic 3D beat-em-ups of all time that can barely be considered a Sonic game. Rise of Lyric is rushed, bloated, and embarrassingly broken, chock full of features that barely function on the game's intended hardware. For the writing, they decided to pull from modern AAA games and kids' television shows. Apparently, being treated like a baby with zero critical thinking skills by characters that never shut the fuck up is what that Western audience was begging for.
I can spin upward using this ramp. Hey, look at all these rings! I bet that pressing this button will do something.
Did you know you're playing a game?
Did you know this is a video game? None of this is real? You're wasting your life.
Knuckles, you rock!
He needs to stop telling Knuckles he rocks.
Knuckles, you rock!
Stop! It was a back-to-back.
I am so glad this was the game I got to skip. So anyway, the route. After the opening sequence, complete with terrible controls, horrible frame rates, and barely functional pre-rendered cutscenes, my first objective was to jump over this door to skip a loading trigger. But I made a mistake and plummeted down into a 20-minute character tutorial.
Someone put this button here for a reason.
I should push this fucking button!
Once I finally made it to the overworld, I got up to the next ledge by landing this wonky Tails jump after a few tries. I then had to cross 2 large gaps of water. There is another pause trick involving Sonic's spin dash that's way faster, but it's also harder to execute, so I went with Knuckles to be safe. I then boarded a plane to the next area, which meant I was well on my way to finishing the game. Next up was the singular biggest skip in the run. Getting to the other side of this bridge takes you to the final section of the game, and luckily, the Knuckles jump got me there in 2 minutes. It was a rough start, but I had breezed past a majority of Sonic Boom in less than an hour.
Holy shit, Yakko.
Am I at the end?
You're 7 hours into the game.
That's what I'm talking about!
And here we are at Creeper Gorge. Now, just because I had to progress through the entirety of this area doesn't mean I did it as intended. I fucked up some awkward jumps and level triggers a few times, but I managed to land a very precise super bounce on Amy that let me skip an entire combat section. There's a large area with Amy and Tails that can be skipped by climbing damaging vines, but I couldn't quite pull it off, so I solved the puzzle the normal way. Luckily, spamming the dodge roll gives you infinite iframes, so nothing could damage me as I casually ignored the fact that I had no idea how this game's combat works. After another successful super bounce to skip a mini-boss, and an absurdly easy fight with Eggman, it was on to the Sky Citadel. The full any % skip involves jumping so far forward that the map doesn't render, requiring you to use a tiny floating plant to identify the right direction to move in and rail to grab onto. The cutscenes and combat I triggered put me in a different spot, and with a mistake in glitched areas almost certainly equaling an endless fall that would force me to reset the game, I carefully navigated around half-loaded platforms until miraculously finding the rail that matched the one in the speedrun video. A few short jumps later, and I was on a plane to the final area, Lyric's Lair. I barely even know who this guy is. Knuckles is once again the shining star, as he can jump over combat barriers and even out of a moving elevator, quickly landing me in the final duel with the strange robot lizard himself. I haven't the faintest clue how this fight actually works, but all I had to do was Knuckles jump into a tube behind Lyric, break a machine to trigger a cutscene, and awkwardly walk around and punch a few times while my teammates finished him off. And just like that, I had beaten Sonic Boom. I hate to say it, but with a group of friends cheering me on, Rise of Lyric was some of the most fun I had all week. I don't give any fucking credit to the game itself. The excitement was in learning a new speedrun and exploiting a game falling apart at every corner. I don't really know how to rate the soundtrack, but from my brief experience, it sounds like a generic orchestral movie score that doesn't really fit Sonic at all. Can't say I'm a fan, but I also didn't hear most of it, so I won't give it a ranking. As the credits rolled on Rise of Lyric, I had fully regained my disdain for 3D Sonic. It felt like an eternity had passed since I played the Adventure series, and there was no trace of hope left in this miserable franchise as the clock struck midnight. Yet strangely enough, I was feeling refreshed after experiencing another game so incredibly bad that it looped back around to being good. And now that the last unknown factor in my challenge was complete, I was ready.
The final game.
Alright, I'm gonna say it. Sonic Forces is the worst 3D Sonic game. It's worse than Secret Rings, it's worse than Black Knight, it's worse than Boom, it's even worse than Sonic 06. Because while 06 was at least trying to be something, tell a story, have cutscenes, implement gameplay variety, Forces feels like the most soulless, rehashed cash grab on this list, and truly cemented the death of the boost formula. This game might be short, but I have a lot to say. Sonic Forces looks good, but who cares? Video games usually look good. Sonic Forces sounds good, but who cares? Sonic games always sound good. As a video game, Forces expects nothing from the player and gives nothing in return. Every movement and combat mechanic is automated to the point of absolute monotony as you blast through absurdly short levels by boosting forward as Sonic or holding down your infinite flamethrower and using the rocket wisp to skip entire stages as the custom character. The wisps why are they back? Classic Sonic's back too, for no reason other than nostalgia bait, because the controls and physics of the 2D levels are the worst they've ever been. I do not understand how you hire a team of fans to develop the diamond in the rough that is Sonic Mania, tie it directly into the story of Forces, and still manage to design some of the worst 2D platforming I've ever seen in a AAA game. Speaking of nostalgia baiting, Forces simply can't resist using it at every turn to garner sympathy. Every old villain makes an appearance, despite half of them not being included in the game outside of cutscenes. Sonic fans love creating original characters, so look, here's some twisted new form of parasocial relationship where you can be friends with Sonic. Yes, you! Friends with Sonic! The game can't be bad. You high five! He called me his friend. Most of the stages are repurposed amalgamations of Green Hill and Chemical Plant, because the development team didn't have the time, budget, or inspiration to come up with new levels or create new assets.
There's sand everywhere. Green Hill's looking a lot more like Sand Hill
There
right
it
now.
is. Yeah!
Jesus.
I don't care about Green Hill anymore because it's been repackaged and resold a billion times. I have the Sonic Mega Collection, the Gems Collection, Sega Mega Drive and Genesis Classics, Sonic Mania, and Sonic Origins. I want new ideas. Referencing old video games can be legendary when done in the right circumstances, like the New Donk Festival in Mario Odyssey or the reward for collecting all 180 emblems in Adventure 2, but the use of Green Hill Zone in Forces represents absolute creative stagnation. And Frontiers is bringing back the old levels again, baby! Sega's age-old, look guys, remember the classic Sonic games? Remember when we made good games? Is so goddamn frustrating, dangling the prospect of a return to form in front of die-hard fans to continue exploiting them for easy profit. Meanwhile, the story repeatedly tries to set up a gritty, hopeless atmosphere before disregarding it every 30 seconds, unintentionally turning Forces into one of the funniest Sonic games ever.
The Death Egg? Oh man, that's not good.
None of this is good, Vector. That's why it's called war.
Cut to a black screen with text. Eggman controls the world. The resistance is losing. Morale is low. And in walks my fucking dumbass with his dogs out on a Sunday. Infinite should know better than to fuck with me. I'm a gamer. Or how about the devastating news that Sonic's been kidnapped and tortured for months, immediately followed by a cutscene where he makes fun of Zavik like nothing ever happened.
Impossible. I cannot be defeated.
wrong, loser.
Oh my
the
God.
things that can't be defeated are heart, soul, and the bonds of friendship.
Shut up. Shut the fuck up.
Ooh, and I just adore the modern trope of non-stop character banter, so I can't even enjoy the music, as Sonic drops stupid one-liner after stupid one-liner, or random soldiers start chatting over the custom character's intercom like it's a water cooler. Forces makes me so mad that I barely even want to talk about the soundtrack, but it deserves a respectable B tier. On one hand, it's got some fantastic vocal tracks, but the 2D stages are hit or miss, and the overall dubstep and EDM influence can range from novel to grating. The boss fights once again fail to offer anything interesting, as they all rip the exact design style we've seen since Unleashed and demonstrate just how creatively bankrupt Sonic games have become in the past decade. But I didn't care. The end was in sight. All that was left between me and freedom was the same goddamn boss from Colors for the third time. As the light at the end of the tunnel came into view, beautiful heights and unspeakable horrors flashed through my mind. 3D Blast, Adventure, Adventure 2, Heroes, 06, Secret Rings, Unleashed, Black Knight, Colors, Generations, Lost World, Boom, Forces. All 13 Sonic games, 13 journeys, 13 soundtracks, 13 stories of squandered potential, 100 hours of gameplay, 21 years of history in a mere 7 days. Most of the games fucking sucked, but why would that change anything? I'm a Sonic fan, goddammit! I'll keep loving this stupid hedgehog even if no one else will! Even if his multi-billion-dollar parent corporation sees him as nothing more than a recognizable mascot and a shameless cash grab, the spirit of Sonic is what matters! 4:04 a.m. I had done it. I had beaten every 3D Sonic game in 7 days. A week of my life, consumed by a blur of triumphs and failures, a whirlwind of childhood memories and shattered dreams. While I would never recommend most of these games to anyone, I honestly had fun. Not in a the games were all good kind of way, but through a strange, self-induced Stockholm Syndrome type beat. Sure, I could have gone for a little more moving around and getting out of the house so my butt didn't hurt and my arms weren't sore from violently shaking the Wii remote, but it was a nice break from the norm. I can't say that I learned any big new lessons or discovered some surprising truth about the 3D Sonic games that everyone has been waiting to hear. Rather, I was reminded once again of why I love Sonic the Hedgehog. In the end, it's the personality behind this franchise that makes it special. Behind every rushed game is the work of passionate developers and artists, from silly characters and fun storylines to beautiful locations and consistently incredible music. Sonic is my favorite game character because of everything he represents, or at least what he used to represent. As I progressed through each entry in this series, it was sad to watch the character arcs established in the games of the early 2000s, even in Sonic 06, disappear. Tails went from finding confidence and independence to the smart sidekick guy, Silver's just kinda there sometimes, and Knuckles fell so far from his post as a valiant protector of the Master Emerald that his only modern trait is being fucking stupid. Gamma instantly became one of the coolest characters in the entire franchise when he fought against his programming and accepted death to free the innocent life trapped inside him, so maybe it's good he stayed dead. Unlike Shadow, who was resuscitated only to be turned into a one-note rival after his moment in the spin-off spotlight. Hell, Sonic used to be a rebellious hero who would risk his life to protect his friends before being reduced to a snarky asshole that can't go 10 seconds without dropping a bad pun.
That was cool.
Pun entirely intended.
I love a good cliche about believing in yourself here and there, but I miss when the story had stakes, when Sonic could be in danger and show a shred of emotion or weakness. I miss when he needed to truly rely on his friends, instead of being some all-powerful god making bad superhero jokes in the face of everything. I miss when the story made me care.
Whoa, what?
Where do you think you're off to all by yourself?
What? But my memory is back now, and, well, from here on out, it's my responsibility, so, I mean, there's no reason for you to come along, so I should just...
Do I need a reason to want to help out a friend?
Thanks, Sonic.
No matter what Frontiers may have in store, the compounded erasure of Sonic's world can't be remedied by a single game. Anything after Forces is gonna feel like a positive step forward for the franchise, but I expect more than single steps from a company that spent the last 15 years sprinting backwards. Yet in spite of it all, Sonic's sheer style and charisma lead me to stick around through thick and thin in the hopes that one day he might reach the heights we all dream of. I spend a lot of my time shitting on the AAA industry and their scummy practices, but Sega frustrates me more than almost any other company. With Sonic, it's personal. It's a shame that he continues to float in the same limbo as Pokemon, a franchise with unlimited potential seen by its shareholders as nothing more than an occasional cash grab to rush to market. With Sega's reign as a giant in the console market long gone, Sonic doesn't need to innovate to survive like he did in the 90s. The brand is kept alive simply by existing, defended at every turn by die-hard fans who desperately wish for something more. So maybe I don't like most of the 3D Sonic games. Sue me. But while some interests come and go, I just can't seem to let go of the blue blur. The rebellious attitude, the excitement of high speeds, the incredibly cheesy songs about never giving up. I love those parts of Sonic. And maybe they're all I really need.
What are you, anyway?
What you see is what you get. Just a guy that loves adventure. I'm Sonic the Hedgehog!